Hey party people. So, I have not updated this in quite a while. And quite a bit has happened since last time I did. So, I was looking at my last videos from November, and like I say, quite a bit has happened. So, first of all, I defended my proposal on December 6th, and it went just fine. Um, in fact, I can't remember a lot of it, but I wrote lots of notes and I've made a few changes. And since then, I've gotten my IRB approved, and so I'm a lot more focused and have a lot better idea of what I'm doing. In fact, I've already done a quarter of my data collection. So I proposed that I would do 30 interviews. My committee felt like 20 would be a more reasonable amount to do. And these are first, one-on-one, probably hour and a half long interviews. And then, yeah, so they thought maybe 20 would be a more reasonable number to actually get to. And I'm finding that that's probably a very good goal. I proposed 30, but at any rate, so I'm using the Strauss and Corbin grounded theory methodology. I'm not sure what I've talked about before, but that's what I ended up using. And the idea with my research has turned out to be trying to identify how refugee teenagers explain or define success and in what their goals are and how they're going about achieving them. And so my interview protocol is pretty simple. There are just a few questions. I ask a little bit about their past and what led them to coming to the United States, and then what the process was like, very open-ended questions. And then I ask them to talk about what success means to them. And a lot of times they'll say things like, education or money, and I push them a little bit and say, well, what do those things afford you, and why do those represent success? And the interviews I've done so far have been fascinating. It seems to go against some of the research that's out there, but I've only done 5, but it's relatively consistent so far, and I'm really seeing a trend toward the fact that education is, and I've interviewed people from Sudan, from Ethiopia, Kenya, from Haiti, and it's so far relatively universal that the education is valued from a very early age, and they come with that interest in education. And so even though a lot of the research and says that if there's support and if there's access to education, then there will be more interest in education, but I'm finding that actually that's something that they're coming with in a lot of situations. Another interesting finding is when I'm talking to these people who tend to be successful, like that in order to stay in touch with the people at Catholic Charities or the people at my agency that I'm recruiting through, they tend to be the successful ones anyway. So it's a little bit of self-selection, and that's definitely a limitation of this research. And since I'm only interviewing people over 21, it's kind of informal contacts that the social workers have, then that's a definite bias that I'm going to get, is people that tend to be successful, that keep in touch with my agency. But another interesting thing I'm finding is that when they're talking about their peers that are less successful, that came through the Unaccompanied Refugee Minor program, they're talking about the fact that a lot of times they came quite a bit younger, and the ones who are younger tended to have a more difficult time assimilating or acculturating, and that's the big question that I'd like to get to through my data analysis, is what should we be doing? Should we be encouraging acculturation? Because what I'm seeing so far is the most successful ones tend to be people who came over the age of 15, 16, had a lot of self-sufficiency before coming, and the struggles tended to be minor that they had once they came, like with family conflict and things like that. But that goes against some of the research that says the younger they are, the more likely they are to come and successfully acculturate, but whereas just the opposite seems to there's beginning of evidence that if they come younger, 12, 11, 11, 12, 13, there are some more conflicts. And some of that is just developmental, I think. I think that's a tougher age in general when we talk about positive youth development. That's a difficult transition period, and so if they get past that in their country of origin, it seems that they're really able to get to this post-traumatic growth or post-traumatic stress growth rather than post-traumatic some sort of disorder associated with the trauma of transplanting cultures. But so it's pretty fascinating stuff, and I'm really interested to see what else will come out of this research. But yeah, for now I'm asking pretty open-ended questions, and I'm finding that even just with my first 5 interviews, there's already a lot of consistency. And in fact, I've interviewed 21, 22-year-olds, and then I've also interviewed people who have been here for 15 or 20 years, and hearing really consistent ideas about assimilation being the goal, and having a focus on work and education rather than cultural maintenance of any kind. And another interesting thing is a lot of the research says if you're from Sudan, it's more healthy to be placed with other Sudanese refugees. But I'm finding that people say that it's less about the country of origin and more about just being around other people in a similar situation. So one person that's from sub-Saharan Africa found that their best friend was Vietnamese, and it wasn't really a cultural thing that drew them together. It was the fact that they were both in this house as strangers and as newcomers, and going through this legal and sociocultural process together. And that was what bound them together, not their culture of origin necessarily. But that's been another really interesting finding that I need to kind of keep in the forefront, and I'd like to throw a few probing questions in there. My questions are set that were approved by the IRB, but I'm finding I need to add a few probes in, and that's definitely one of them, about what people were the most influential and supportive, and so I'm really excited. I've been able to interview a couple of women, which I've not seen before in the literature. And I have another appointment today to talk to a woman, and she came quite a while ago, but still very hard population to get in touch with. And I'm really excited to see if we can have a little bit of variation. And so I'm continuing with my theoretical sampling strategy in drawing from a small pool of potential interviewees, and trying to methodically and do it according to some sort of theoretical approach. But also, at some point, I'm interested in maximum variation as well, and seeing what kind of breadth can we get, and then where are the congruities and similarities between their stories. So I'm really excited about how things are going. I am going to start updating this every week more consistently, and that will keep me motivated. So I've done my 5 interviews, and I've started a manuscript. I did a presentation in Los Angeles for an international conference of social work, and looking at my literature review and some of the theories I'm excited about applying. And so I'm writing a manuscript for that as I'm waiting for these interviews. And in the meantime, I'm doing my interviews and taking notes, and then doing extended field notes, and I'll do a more thorough analysis as I finish my interviews. But things are going really well. I'm really excited. I feel like there's some good stuff coming out of this. So I hope that if you have similar interests, then this can be helpful, and I'd love to communicate with you. Yeah. So I think that's all for today.